I use the microphone that's speaking. Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to the special session on the HRI. So let's welcome the first speaker, Patrick Mann for the Dialog X for task-driven embodied agents. Thanks.
Okay. Hello, my name is Patrick, and I'm here to present our work on adding Dialog X to the task-driven embodied agents that chat or teach dataset. I'll give a brief overview of the dataset that we released earlier this year. The publication is published at AAAI. And then I'll go into the Dialog X annotation work that we've done, as well as predicting those Dialog X, and some applications of the Dialog X to embodied agents, such as predicting the next utterance, Dialog Act, action plan prediction, as well as the execution from Dialog History task that is part of the teach data set, where we take the Dialog History and try to predict the next environment actions that are taken by the agent up to the next dialog sequence. I want to start to give a shout out to my co-authors first. Both Banana and Ashwaya are equally contributing primary authors of this publication. Unfortunately, neither of them could be here today, so I have to deal with me. And Dialog, who advised on this work. So the teach data set, the motivation behind collecting the teach data set is that we believe to move towards more agents that are not specialized in a single purpose task that can, for example, solve more complex household tasks such as cooking for you or cleaning up. We need like an efficient means of communicating task information with them, as well as interacting and collaborating with them while they work on the specific task they're doing. One such requirement is that we need to be able to resolve ambiguity during tasks. In this example, somewhat constructed, the person requests from the agent to bring them a mug, and when the agent arrives at the mugs, it sees multiple mugs and it doesn't know which one to pick up. And in this case, the human has a preference, and after the agent asks, which one should I bring? I see many. It says, I would like the red one, please. And you can imagine this happens in like more complex scenarios even more frequently. And conversations like this in household scenarios is what we collected in a teach data set. It is set up as an asymmetric collaborative task. It's collected in a human-human fashion. So there's two annotators paired together, assigned to asymmetrical roles. The commander, which has perfect world knowledge and the task information and control over a disembodied camera in a virtual environment, as well as the follower, who has only access to the egocentric view of the embodied agent, and only the follower can interact with the environment. And both collaborate through an unconstrained chat interface, where they at each point in time can communicate. And we collected several thousand such sessions, interleaving dialog actions and environment actions across multiple different task types. Some of these task types are hierarchical. For example, make breakfast consists of making something to eat and drink, which then further breaks up into smaller tasks. One such example task is boiling a potato. And in this example session, the follower starts and asks, what should I do today? And the commander directly instructs with the task information, boil a potato. And then the follower navigates around in the environment, picks up the required utensils, the potato and the pot, tries to fill the pot with water, but runs into a problem. The pot is too big, it doesn't fit into the sink. And so it asks, and tries to resolve the situation, asks if there's a different pot, but the commander says, I have a different idea. Why don't you pick up the cup, fill it with water, and then transfer the water into the pot? And the follower thinks that's a good idea and proceeds, and they solve the task together. When we look at the baseline models performance that we released with the data set, we see that the language features only contribute a fraction to the overall task performance. And so we're hoping that through adding dialog acts to the data set, that we can improve the natural language understanding of the model and overall also improve the task performance. But furthermore, adding dialog acts allows us to analyze the patterns in which the annotators share information in the sessions, as well as hopefully use them as guides in work to simulate more such sessions that can help us improve the model performance even further. This is the example session that I showed you earlier, together with the dialog acts annotated at the side. As you can imagine, some of the utterances are long and might map to multiple dialog acts. In this case, we also ask the annotators to segment the utterances, such that one utterance segment always exactly maps to one dialog act. In the first utterance, for example, hello, what shall I do today? We created two segments, hello, which is a greeting, and what shall I do today, which is a request for instruction. Overall, there's 18 such dialog acts. Originally, we started with 24, but there were some confusion, so we narrowed it down and consolidated them to 18. Around half of these are like generic, like dialog acts that have been used frequently before, like greeting, confirmation, acknowledgement, and so on. But we also added around 10 or so task-specific ones that are about sharing and requesting instructions or sharing object and location information. If you look at the distribution for these dialog acts between the different roles at the right side of the table, we do see that it reflects the asymmetric nature of the task. And as you may expect, the commander usually provides information, whereas the follower requests information. Next, we try to predict these dialog acts given the underlying utterance. And for that, we train a Roberta model on the data set. We use the segmented, the ground truth segmentation for this. So it's a single label prediction task. And we try out a set of different features. One is the speaker tag, which provides the ground truth role. Since this data set does not actually have strict turn taking, it is not trivial to know who is going next. We also try to, we use the dialog history as well as the ground truth dialog act history in this task. So if we look at the performance, using dialog acts and speaker tags individually both improves the performance of just using the utterance as a baseline. But combining the dialog history with the dialog act history even further improves the performance in this task. Combining both the dialog act history and the ground truth information of the speaker role does not greatly and significantly improve the performance in this task. So we think that because the dialog acts are so asymmetrical in nature, that they do tend to capture the speaker role information in the data set. Next, we're going to move to the applications of these dialog acts. The first task we looked at is next utterance dialog act prediction, where we try to predict the dialog act for the next utterance, such that we can, for example, ground natural language generation or natural response selection models on this information. The setup is the same. We use pretty much the same features. We fine-tune a reporter model, except that we do not have the underlying utterance anymore. We try to predict the next, the dialog act for the next utterance. The first thing that we can see is that the overall performance of this task is significantly lower than the previous task. It's pretty much half the accuracy. But we do see that speaker text and dialog act history significantly improves the performance compared to the performance improvement we saw in the previous task. So we see that it's almost a 10% accuracy gain. Furthermore, if we combine speaker tag and dialog acts, in this task, we do see a small gain, but it's not double the performance. So it is somewhat reinforcing the idea that the speaker roles and the dialog act history capture somewhat the same information, but for this task, there's actually a slight difference in performance. We also analyze the performance on this task specific to the roles. Like it's the same model, we just now look at only follower segments or commander segments. And we do see that the commander task has a much higher accuracy as the follower segments. And we have some theories why this may be. One, there's much more utterances from the commander, much more, so there's more training data. And second, we think that it is easier to determine when to share information following a request than to know when to request information just from the dialog history. The next task we looked at is plan prediction. Often when you build an agent, you may not want to immediately predict the ground truth action sequence, which may be like move forward, turn left, pick up this particular object. But you want to generate a more symbolic action sequence to like guide the overall plan for the task. In this case, we try to predict a sequence of object manipulations that, if executed, would lead to the desired state in the environment. So one such example of an output is pick up the tomato, place it on the countertop, pick up the butter knife, slice the tomato, and so on. However, to actually execute that sequence, you would have to navigate the environment. You have to like actually locate where on the countertop the object is, and so on. So this is like at a higher level, we're trying to solve the task. When we look at the performance or gain potentially for the dialog acts in this task, we do see that there is some improvement. However, because we were not able to actually test execution success rate of these plans in the environment at this point, we only looked at which method produces more valid plans. So we're using a BART model here with 3D decoding. And if we do add dialog acts, the model produces a validly, like a syntactically valid plan more frequently, which we think that there is like a small gain in performance, but to actually know whether this helps, we would actually have to execute these plans, which we have not done yet. However, there's more work on this coming up in the future. And the last task we looked at is the execution from dialog history task, where we try to predict the environment actions following a dialog sequence. And we looked at pretty much at the same features as before, and we have similar results where dialog acts seem to slightly improve the performance, but here even more so results are somewhat mixed, and we don't think that the dialog acts are not necessarily the best way forward to improve on this task. However, we think that they are still useful, for example, for dialogue generation, so that we can simulate more dialogues and train the models on that, and through that get better task improvements. Thank you. I guess the video is covering the QR code, but you can get the data set at this location, and dialog acts will also be released there soon, hopefully still throughout the conference.
We got 7 minutes for the question answering. So.
Hey, thanks for the talk. So you started off by talking about the importance of clarification when you have multiple distractor objects and so on. How much is that really required in the current teach data set? How many distractors, what percentage of dialogues actually require clarification?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have statistics for how many data sets dialogues would require clarification, but we do see that there's a lot of like confirmation, like not a lot, but there is dialogue acts or like utterances that are associated with dialogue acts related to disambiguation and confirmation, for example. So we have confirmation question, we have alternate questions like the yellow or the blue mark, for example. And yeah,
Okay, so
it is like it's a small fraction compared to the overall number of utterance segments. Unfortunately, I don't know how many like dialogues or sessions are affected by
So
this.
did you design any of the tasks in order that they would really require clarification to be successful?
There may be tasks that could require clarification. Like the example that I gave initially, where there's reference-based disambiguation, I don't think we have any of those tasks, but there are situations where information is missing about like particular locations, for example. Is it like here or there? Such cases where there is collaboration required to share information, those are definitely happening.
Okay, thanks. So final question for me is, there are lots of dialogue act schemes out there, different annotation schemes for sets of dialogue acts. Did you look into them all and find that they were not, sufficient for your requirements? Or
yeah, we had looked at some of those. I think particularly around like we were debating quite heavily whether we should go with like some kind of intent slot scheme to like extract some of the information further. For example, there's a lot of different type of requesting dialogue acts here. Like maybe there should just be one request dialogue act and then some kind of hierarchical setup. I would have to refer to the primary authors of the publication for the final decision, where they didn't decide to go with this. But I think for our purposes of like the main motivation was to immediately see like improvement in the tasks on the teach data set. And this was like a very straightforward way of doing it. And so that's probably the main reason why we went with this.
Thanks.
Thanks for the talk. I wanted to come back to the role of speaker tags in the presentation. So in the first evaluation of dialogue act prediction, they didn't help. But then in the next utterance dialogue act prediction, they did help. So maybe you could tell me more what's going on here. And do you feel like you had enough speaker tag data to work with? Or do you think they could help in the long run, compared to the other factors?
Yeah, so in the first task of dialogue act prediction, we do have the utterance. So the utterance itself probably heavily carries information about which speaker uttered the utterance. Whereas in the next utterance dialogue act prediction task, when we are using speaker tags, we're actually using the information of who is the speaker of the next utterance. So we are that is probably why it is more helpful in this task than in the previous task. And we think that is like a realistic assumption, because if you're building an agent, you presumably know who you are and if you're speaking.
Yeah, on the slide you had before, the table with the distributions of acts, you had very rare instructions by the follower and requests for instructions. Yeah, it was this one. Do you know examples of what instructions from the follower or request for instruction by the commander might look like?
Yeah, I don't have concrete examples of those right now. But I think that some of these may be like artifacts of how these of the data has been collected, because they are two annotators, and so not everything is necessarily like set up in like in a super controlled environment. So we may have situations where the follower may instruct what the commander is supposed to do next. Like I think they probably should have been classified in one of these interface related categories, but I would assume that they're those, but you're free to explore the data set
right, yeah.
yourself once it is released.
Sorry about that, because of time limit, sorry. If you have any questions, please, you can have a chat with the speakers offline later. And I think we have to continue. Thanks a lot for. Our next speaker will be Josie. It's Josie Torres.